Hi guys, I'm at a place I know nothing about, so maybe I'll edit in some dialogue later and just take some video. I'm driving to Arizona and I saw a sign that said Wupatki National Monument, and what we have here is, buildings and cities. I'm assuming this is Puebloan, Anasazi, ancestral Hopi, people that built buildings in this very dry and inhospitable environment.
Okay, I'm drinking wine while I make these videos. I don't care about the production values because this is only made for me and not for profit or gain. And a quality made product is just as equally ignored as a poor quality made product. So why bother? I'm going to start mispronouncing names because we're getting into difficult names. Wupatki is near now what is called Flagstaff, Arizona, whereas now Flagstaff is where all hipster wannabe hikers, climbers, and other styles of pseudo-naturist men and women flock to in their Patagonia and North Face costuming to let that unused ski jacket die the moment they find a seat at one of the city's multitudes of thematic and prefab hipster and dive bars to crack open a 13.8% alcohol by volume pint of smoked cardamom lactic French farmhouse-style Highland porter and sit there for the next 20 years, never to go whitewater tubing again. At the time of Wupatki's apogee, the area was dominated by the Puebloan peoples and was a fertile land of frantic and bountiful agriculture, of mastery of nature, of heroic champions shaping the land, and it was all kind of thanks to the nearby volcanic eruptions fortifying the area's soil. I wonder what a volcanic eruption would do for Flagstaff today. Probably send its thousands upon thousands of meth addict juggalo homeless raining down over the skyline of Salt Lake City, definitely to that city's benefit. Wupatki was occupied by the Puebloan people, specifically and primarily, this is where I'm getting names wrong, Cojonina, Cayenta, and Sinagua peoples from about 1150 to 1225 AD. As a permanent settlement, most likely around 2,000 or so people lived at the site permanently, but it is probable that thousands more passed through for purposes of trade or ceremony on a regular basis.
These are sites that were inhabited year-round, and this really was a city. Every direction you look in, once your eyes adjust, you realize every hilltop has a building on top of it that's now pretty much decomposed. What was I going to say? Oh, and this place is nearly 1,000 years old. Most of these buildings date 800 to 900 years old. This part of the United States is amazing, ladies and gentlemen, because these places get no rain. It's hard to grow crops. There's not a lot of trees, and yet the people who lived here, they made easy work of it. And here they practiced something called dry farming, where they didn't really need rain and they didn't really need irrigation to grow their corn.
Though the terrain around Wupatki was rugged, the rainy season short, water scarce, and temperatures sometimes extreme, Wupatki was a bountiful settlement, thanks to the Puebloan use of dry farming. Dry farming is basically understanding the land and understanding resource. They planted all around the area in small plots, basically playing the odds that some plots would spring up and some wouldn't. They took advantage of the volcanic soil, specifically the volcanic pumice left behind by eruptions. Pumice is porous stone and stores water well, making it ideal for water retention in soil during dry periods. They also irrigated. They used pebble mulch and field houses, which could be moved in order to get the most out of water, sun, and soil. They were successful enough in their methods to sustain and thrive, to produce enough food for themselves, but also for trade. And what are you successful at? Do you have what it takes to dry farm volcanic and rugged northern Arizona terrain to learn these indigenous methods? Or is your thing that when you see an indigenous person, you feel the need to speak for them and to advocate for some skewed white person's notion of indigenous justice, all the while not even thinking that you could perhaps pack up your Black Lives Matter sign and leave the house you bought for a dime in a gentrified neighborhood? You could move to the suburbs, get out of their way. and shut the fuck up and concentrate on your tea therapy so the other asexuals at the book club can compliment you on your thin and downy mustache while the descendants of the indigenous peoples can quietly reclaim their lands and live without your virtue signaling for a while. I swear they will still buy your zine.
This structure here, they're calling it the Citadel because it's giant and it stands on top of a hill. It's got over 30 rooms, and it's this incredible mix of work with stonework, hewn stone like this, and massive basalt blocks at the base.
The architecture of Wupatki is distinct due to the specific stone found in the area, a form of red sandstone called Mounds sandstone. Probably pronounced that wrong. Thin and flat blocks of sandstone were layered and then held together with a simple mortar made of clay and water. Each settlement, each community with Wupatki lived in a single building, which usually contained lots of rooms. The largest and tallest structure at Wupatki, the one I'm in at this point of the video, had over 100 rooms, as well as containing a ball court. Ball courts are abundant in Mesoamerica, seen in Mayan and Toltec and Zapotec sites, in addition to countless others. But they do exist as well in some Chacoan and Puebloan sites in North America, evidence of just how far the cultural influence of Mesoamerican society spread. So this one at Wupatki is the northernmost ball court in existence, tantalizing evidence of some kind of connection, cultural connection, to the area we now call Mexico.
This is a good example of some really attentive and conscious choices in the building. Stone and the mortar in between, which looks like it's adobe or mud. Then, aesthetically placed around here are these black basalt stones. I'm assuming that's volcanic. I know nothing about geology. They're peppered about in what seems to be more, aesthetically pleasing intent to decorate or symbolize something rather than for its use in construction.
There are over 2,500 man-made structures at Wupatki. This ranges from 800 or so pueblos to ovens, hunting bluffs, ball courts, kivas, courtyards, amphitheaters, and more. And it's amazing for me to try to imagine how a relatively small community of 2,000 or so people was so productive and that the area saw so much use, especially when the typical modern North American town of 2,000 people doesn't do much beyond smoking meth, fucking their cousins, and whose only construction methods are to retrofit a John Deere tractor well enough to circumvent the laws regarding one's revoked driver's license for their numerous drunk driving offenses, to thereby continue to be able to make the daily runs to the corner gas station for cases of Coors Light, or frantically nailing together discarded aluminum, tin Amoco and Shell gas station signs to serve as a fragile hillbilly elegy nostalgic and porous sun shelter during times the extended portions of one's inbred family come over for a visit to shoot guns at one another in an argument about just who it was who put the baby in Deborah Sue, and to while away the evening watching Duck Dynasty, marveling at the 78-inch flat-screen TV Joe Bob Clarkey Sue just put himself into a life of indentured servitude for in the form of 50 years of highly inflated $50 a week payments to the local rent-a-center.
And these buildings here have all the bewildering features that the stuff I've seen in places like Chaco and New Mexico have, which is rooms without doorways, or low windows or tall windows, just basically anything you just could not possibly fit through. Other ones that were used to live in, but others that served unknown, mysterious purpose. In the case of this area, we've got the Citadel on top of the hill with its 30 rooms, and another building down here with 8 rooms that it's overlooking. So this comprised a village, for sure. A lot of people did stuff here and built an amazing structure that has lasted almost 1,000 years.
Puebloan architecture is quite varied, but the common theme is that they constructed buildings, basically apartment buildings, just like the ones you and I rot away in today. typically between 1 and 3 stories tall, but some as high as 5 stories, and constructed of adobe and stone. Because adobe is basically a simple mortar of local clay and soil and water, decomposed rapidly, Pueblo structures were constantly maintained and remodeled. And this delicate adobe is also why many structures have not survived to present day. Ladders were used to access at levels, not staircases, with doors and windows placed in what can seem to us as perplexingly odd locations. It's hard to understand the full functionality of the pueblos as they differ greatly to the apartment buildings we build today. Oftentimes, many rooms were never used or even accessible, with walled off or without windows or doors, and that they contained kivas, which were used for ceremony and religious practice, courtyards, ball courts, and many other such spaces. All means that these buildings were probably more communal spaces in the large rooms, and the smaller rooms were used for storage and who knows what else, with most of daily life taking place outside of the pueblo. The Puebloan building was a living thing, a connection to earth and to the cosmos, and a reflection of the society using it. Can you imagine saying that about the apartment you do your work from home digital office job in? Do you even know who your fucking neighbors are? Name them. Give me the names of 10 of your neighbors and tell me how often you interact with them, how much you work together and support each other. You fucking OAN news network chugging Elon and Rogan cum guzzling puffy incels.
Yeah, these buildings were thick-walled, sometimes multiple stories high, had very small, short doorways, barely contained windows, maybe had a couple holes in the top for venting smoke, and that's about it. But they were used for everything from living in to having ceremonies in to gathering in to using as storage, for children's play areas, for collecting water, and lots of other uses that we don't know about. And these buildings are of such solid construction that European settlers and Americans used them for shelter, just slapped roofs on them and kept living in them. And so part of the restoration efforts here was to basically strip away the modifications. So what you see here is what's the stuff that was standing when people came here in the 1800s and started using these structures again. All right. God damn it. Fuck. Jesus Christ. Look at this. I got nothing to say. I'm speechless. Massive cities covered all of North America. And all us white folks don't have a clue about it. Maybe if we did, that history would inform our present. Maybe we would stop being such fuck-ups, such pointless pieces of shit. Start honoring history and learning from it. Probably not.
Like so many other pre-colonial settlements and cities of the area, Wupatki was abandoned. We can't know why, for sure, because their stories became vague and distant myth thanks to us arriving and killing off their descendants, and dismantling their social structure to such a point that few storytellers survived or had means of communication to codify these tales in indigenous memory. We can only guess, based on archaeological evidence, that a combination of environmental and social factors led to its decline and desertion. After Wupatki, I headed to Flagstaff to enjoy the kind of food and drink a libertine only such as myself can enjoy without breaking the bank, or without requiring double shifts the following 2 weeks to compensate. I cuisined appetizers of honeydew sorbet dressed in freeze-dried goat cheese and olive oil. I enjoyed cocktails themed to the food and crops of the very indigenous we've relegated to outlier reservations, which were made of corn whiskey, berry sugars, and dressed in sage and apple blossom. And after a delectable meal that costs more than many make in a week, I fumbled down to the Orpheum Theater to nurse a 40-ounce of Colt 45 in the street corner and while away with my memories of the many, many events I'd stage in that opulent theater many years before my current time there. Flagstaff to me has been a barometer for the death of American culture. You see, I ran a really strange and outsider show, the kind of thing that was unique, undefinable, roughshod, earnest, and fun, the kind of thing that is not celebrated today at all in popular or underground culture or even thought of as a possibility. And we watch, going there year after year, as our audiences dwindled in this 1,000-seat theater, right in tandem with the rise of social media to prominence, as well as the American culture's descent into American monoculture. At one point, we could no longer bring enough crowd into the theater to make playing there worthwhile, and our shows were moved to the only sustainable music venue at this time, microbreweries. And this has happened in your town, I'm sure. Every mid-sized American city back in the day had a theater. The Orpheum itself was a chain of theaters on what was known as the Orpheum Circuit. If any of you folks remember the initials RKO, as in RKO Radio Pictures, taglines of films and radio and shows from the 20s to the 50s, the 46 or so Orpheum theaters were merged into the RKO Corporation when vaudeville declined and cinema took over. So all these Orpheum vaudeville theaters were converted into movie theaters. And that long decline in your city of the original vaudeville house into a movie theater, followed by an abandonment during the 60s and the 70s and all the economic and social turmoil that happened then, and then to rehabilitation in the 70s and 80s as a new movie theater, following to usage in the 90s and aughts as a community theater, and then its final death in the 2010s or 20s when the last people who went out to see shows died, and microbreweries, enjoying a boom at that very time, began looking for watered-down jam bands to supply background noise to their tasteless patrons. This is the exact era that I had the misfortune of being born into as an artist and musician. So there in Flagstaff, first theaters, and then in microbreweries, we played for the Patagonia wearing beardos with their palate only for jamgrass and IPAs. And the booking agent at the room said to me, I can't book anything other than jam bands or EDM in the city anymore. No one comes out for anything else. And our former shows at the Orpheum, they brought out freaks. People dressed in costume came in large groups. They were loud, they were involved, they were interactive. They rushed the stage and danced their asses off during our 20-minute improvisational closers. Each one of these people had a story. They were on a quest in their life, and they were making their way through life the best they could. But at the brewery, day job and semi-professional beardos dressed in such a way as it was now kosher to wear sweater vests and hiking boots at their office jobs, to have tribal-style sleeve tattoos, whereas these kinds of things were once very obvious and loud statements of not advocating for normal societal practices. These mainstream fucks stared at us in confusion. They called us un-American. They would pull me aside after the show for a mansplaining, I'm all for freedom of speech, except when, dose of idiocracy. You can say these observations are wrong. You can say things are not like this, but you're not going out. You're not seeing shows. You're not taking risks. It's too risky to take risks. It's too risky that the performance you're seeing or that is not socially sanctioned, or the performer is not socially sanctioned, or that they might soon be canceled. The music needs to have a beat, preferably electronic, to match the synthetic pharmaceuticals you dosed before the show, or the synthetic pharmaceuticals you regularly dose that your doctor prescribed you to stave off the self-loathing and desire for suicide. The lyric of music needs to be safe, basic, can't make fun of anyone who's marginalized. It can't be too personal as not to align with the mainstream. They can't really be so complex as to actually require attentive listening or complex thinking. And this is the way it is now. I challenge you to prove me that I'm wrong. So after weeping in front of the Orpheum, I ended up at a Cornish pasty shop after the trip down memory lane, and I told tales of glorious times to the young hipsters working the bar, of times when people went out and did stuff. As they all told me, all anyone does in Flagstaff now is get drunk, that the town is a bar scene and nothing more. Just as one of their own burst through the door to exclaim she'd just totaled her car, crashing into an elk, to then take a shot of whiskey, and then to find solace in the arms of the toxic boy playing pool with the drug dealer from the Sinaloa cartel. I know this because I spoke to him. The supplier to all these kids who yearn and yell for justice and equity, whose drug money earned from them goes to the most violent cartel that's ever existed in this world, whose money pays for the AK-47s of assassinations, whose money pays for the machetes of yet another burial pit of 40 severed heads found yet again in the Sonoran Desert. I didn't have the heart to tell these little hipster kids about the villain in their midst and his crimes that they support with their American dollars that is completely antithetical to their cries for human rights and agency for the indigenous. such as the indigenous losing life and land to the drug cartels, who they support with their drug purchases. Look up the current wars going on in the Colombian jungle where indigenous are fighting drug militias with machetes. Our money, when you buy coke, weed, pills, whatever, that money pays for machine guns for militant cartel killing indigenous people. But such is life, so it goes.
Entertainment, entertainment.